So I will be brief.
You take your time, Johnny.
Okay.
Speaking.
So we have,
Important information.
Yes.
we have a number of internal data projects going on in a number of departments within the district. So everything you're about to see relies on a lot of data from different departments, a lot of collaboration. Back in the fall of 2022, my group started experimenting a little bit with GIS, with mapping systems, and with a little bit of our data. About that same time, spring of 2023, the In Weekly asked the Haas Center to update a map that the Studer Community Institute had made in 2015 called Pockets of Poverty. And comparing what they put out with what we had going on internally, we saw that we have a bit more granular data, and we began to see corridors of our attendance zones. So here's our base map that we'll be working from. We're going to work from the entire county, plus also a core area that will show up several times. We divide, our transportation department divides the district into 330 attendance zones, which you can think of largely as neighborhoods, although they don't necessarily follow neighborhoods, and they're large and they're small. They make sense for transportation and for the way that humans think about the county. They're not scientific, they're not uniform. But it allows us, because there's 330 of them, to be more granular with how we can look at some of our internal data. Also, what you're about to see is relative data. It's comparing parts of the county to other parts of the county. It's not based on a standard national benchmark. It's an idea of visualizing what we have. So these are our attendance zones. You can see them overlaid on the roads here. All right, so first question is, where are our students? So I'm going to show you three ways. We're going to show you coverage, where we have students. It's been anonymized so that people can't look at the map and zero in on a student's house. We're going to show you the number of students per attendance zone, and then we'll turn that into density, number of students per mile. So this is a general idea of where our students are. The areas that they are not are probably timber and farmland. And then this is the density. The darker colors are more dense, more students per mile. And to give you a close-up, oh, sorry, not density, these are the actual counts, my apologies. So as you can see, some of the larger areas have more students in them. But even if we zoom in to this core area, you can see right in the middle, the most students we have are in the attendance zone behind the Walmart over on Mobile Highway, 574.
Yeah.
And these are our students that are presently in our schools?
Yes, these are students that are known to transportation,
Okay.
whether or not they ride the bus. And that's important because geocoding addresses can steer you wrong, but Paul Combs knows exactly where everybody is, because if he doesn't, then the bus misses them. So I trust his data there.
Yeah.
And so if we just look at attendance zones that have more than 250 students, this is the picture we get. And then if we zoom in,
when you look at that slide before where it says how many students, you can really see in the high growth census tract areas the expansion of students in them areas.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And the attendance zones were created before that growth, and so if they were ever updated, we'd probably slice Beulah into a few more zones. In moving into the core area, you can see that 574 attendance zone, bordered right by another high count at 417, and that'll be relevant towards the end of the presentation. And again, these are arbitrary classification, not arbitrary, but the classifications are, we pick a number of classifications and then we break it off where it makes sense, and we can reclassify as necessary just to give us visualizations. And then this is the density. You'll notice that the northern end of the county is not very dense, as anybody who's driven to Northview can attest. But zooming in, we also see just how dense it is in our core here. we go ahead and just take the sort of ultra-dense attendance zones, we can see the formation of corridors here. So that's where our students are. Now we want to look at poverty, low socioeconomic status. The national data tends to be things like census tracts, zip codes, larger units, and that's what, it's well-vetted data, and that's what pockets of poverty can use. We can go a bit more granular, but we have to use imperfect measures, other ways of looking at it. So two of them would be, we can take the county data on assessments. We can take homesteaded properties, because we are comparing apples to apples. We know that if you have a homesteaded property, you're living in it. However, it's an imperfect measurement because that assessment isn't done every year. So it's going to drift a bit. The other thing we can look at is free and reduced lunch status. If we give weights to did not apply or did not qualify, and qualifies for reduced lunch and qualifies for entirely free, and then average them out for the students in a zone, we can get an idea of socioeconomic status that way. But because not all students who are eligible apply for free and reduced lunch, that count will be skewed as well. So if we take both of those and kind of use them together, we can get an idea within the zones of socioeconomic status. All right, so the upper values, the darker values, are the ones where the assessed value is lower in this particular map. Zoom in again, and then I'll go ahead and once again filter. And so we see that we have low assessments up around Century, and then we have our corridor again. There it is. All right, so let's then compare that with the free and reduced lunch. And here we see the same kinds of patterns. A few different attendance zones, but you can see the pattern is generally the same. Okay, so we've looked at where the students are. We've looked at a couple of measures of poverty that are imperfect. Finally, we'll take one academic measure. We'll look at extremes. So for math scores, of course, we have achievement levels. Students who are achieving at level 1 are achieving at the lowest level. At 5, they are achieving at the highest level. We can get a ratio of just where that skew is by taking account of the number of students in a zone who are at level 5 and dividing it by the number who are at level 1. So that if you have a number that comes out very low, that's going to be an attendance zone where many students got a level 1 achievement and very few got a level 5. And so it's a different way of kind of looking at the achievement range within a zone. And here we are. The areas where it's white are basically areas where we don't really have data for those levels. Again, in our core, and we filter. Actually, this one I filtered several times. So these are the 4 lowest classifications, followed by the 3 lowest classifications, followed by the 2 lowest classifications, and I stopped there. You have a little band right in the middle, and of course, back up in the north end, just west of Century, and then of course we have our core. They are. So corridors. I came up with 2 sample corridors because we can combine this data. We can look at where things overlap. So if we take both those measures of poverty, low achievement and student density, where we look for high student density and low for everything else, and then we see where they fall, and then we add a buffer just to make it a bit more contiguous. We first, these are our overlaps when we go to almost but not quite the most extreme levels for each of those maps. Go ahead and add a 1,800-foot buffer around it, and then close in the holes, and here we have one sample corridor. Again, this is all relative. It's not It's not a pure benchmark, but it gives you a visualization comparatively. We could also get stricter with it. If we take the strictest levels and take out student density and just look at the two measures of poverty and the achievement ratio, this is what we get. These are the attendance zones that we would highlight. And then if we add the most dense areas onto that, we can see that around Hollywood, we have two very dense areas next to it. And so that would be an area that we could send resources to, both to affect the socioeconomic and academic goals and also reach a very large number of children. So that's another way of looking at a corridor. So that's pretty much it. There's an extended version of this for the Children's Trust. There are potential community partners at your and the superintendent's discretion. And
Forgive me.
we do have additional visualizations that I haven't shown today and other non-GIS projects. And my hope is that eventually we'll be able to do some predictive modeling for various things that the community cares about.
Johnny, before they start asking you questions,
I mean, that's,
will you
we've been
take it
waiting to see this
back
a long time.
to the slide prior to this one? Okay. I wanted to commend you for everything, you and Jim. But this ended up really with 11 corridors of concern. Way to go. And you need to know, we won't forget about Century. We know that Century's there. But there's 11 here, and that's what you've been hearing us talk about.
11 without Century.
Yes.
Okay.
Talked about the attendance zones. When Mrs. Payne and I were together, I would talk about one of them. She could just spit out the zip code. We've been going through this. And this won't surprise our board
Hold
members.
closer to your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. This won't surprise you, our board members, at all. But I believe in the Paul Bryant School of Leadership, and this is a great example of it. You get really, really smart people in the room. You get them to do what they need to do, and we've got a bunch of them sitting out here in blue chairs. You can call it big idea committee. You can call it whatever you want to. But I feel like this is what we need to communicate to our entire community. Then we need to be able to show, all right, we want your help, and this is where we need you, but this is where we're going to focus. This is where we're going to put our resources. We'll be fair. We'll be fair. It may not always be equitable, but we're going to do what we've got to do to find a place for improvement at these sites, because I think that's what our community expects. They want to see us improve. So I really want to tell both of you thank you. I was a little bit nervous about all of this different data, so David, I agree with you. Maybe we kind of keep it brief when we go there on the 20th, because this is really good, and I think if you can just hit them in the head real quick a couple of times and let them know this is what it is, instead of them, sitting back and kind of getting into a lull, because we're going to need a lot of a lot of resources to be able to make the type of impact that we want to make. I wanted to tell all of y'all thank you for this, because this is where we need to go. And then y'all ask all the questions you need to ask. So thank you,
Okay.
both of you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Adams?
Ms. Superintendent, I've been waiting for something like this for a long time. I know me and Patty, we talked about St. Petersburg, where they spent millions and millions and millions of dollars, and then they finally got smart and came back and did exactly what you've done and found out that their pockets of poverty or areas of corridors of concerns increased. Okay, so they spent money, but it wasn't targeted to the proper areas, and this is just laying it right out to exactly where these students are and for these nonprofits and for the Children's Trust. And Ms. Superintendent, I don't think after you get done with the Children's Trust, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a presentation for the county commissioners and the city council, so they could see this data. It's sitting right there, identifies the exact place that we got the problems at. So marvelous to the whole team that put it together. Just marvelous. And over time, we should see if these areas start moving. Because we do got some redevelopments going into the downtown areas and stuff, so it'd be interesting. And that's what happened in St. Petersburg. They found out some places just moved to different areas. So marvelous. Thank you, Superintendent.
Mr. Fetzko.
Well, from my days driving around the school district, going to schools day after day after day, I look at this slide that's up there now, and I see 4 schools.
Yeah.
Oakcrest, Global, Warrington Elementary, or the Warrington area, Global, Oakcrest, Warrington,
Montclair's the other one.
and then up at the north end is mainly going to be Bratt. But those are the schools that we could identify at this point, and I guess everybody on staff already knew that. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer for us looking at our students who are struggling and the location. When you do it by the location, those are the schools that they're going to need the most resources and the greatest effort to lift and get everybody where they need to be.
I really appreciate getting this information, and I believe the community, to your point, Mr. Adams, because I have said this to Mr. Leonard, I think we finally have a superintendent that owns the students that are in our schools and understands that they are the ones that we need to be teaching, and we've got to figure out what other support system can be provided in our community to help these families of these students. And if we could get the healthcare community, the housing community, all at the table talking about these particular corridors of concern, it wouldn't matter whether they moved, because we would be addressing their needs where they are and preparing them for when they had to move somewhere else. And I think that, as you said, we've been waiting for this, and technology has helped us get to where we are, and the people in the room, of course, have done that too. But I just, we now have identified it, but we can't do it alone. And so we've got to be able to reach out to those other resources in our community and get them to say, okay, if we're going to work on Montclair, law enforcement, healthcare, not just community schools, because, I mean, that costs a lot of money, but we have resources in each of those silos that they work in right now, and we need to get them all in the same barn, not in a silo. So I applaud you both for helping us get here, and I believe that we're on the brink of something amazing.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to say this. I also want to echo the congratulatory remarks, praise remarks from Mr. Bobbitt and yourself. So many people in the community always are approaching me about being laser focused and pinpointing the problems, and I think what you've done today helps us to do that, and it helps everyone to be focused. And I like the idea that Mr. Adams had about presenting it to the city council and also the commissioners. But my question to you is, this is such an extensive report. What could you extend beyond that may not be involved in this report right now?
Well, slides that you haven't seen include the median age or the median grade level for every attendance zone, the number of absences average for every attendance zone. Basically, since we know where the students are and we have the zones, any data that we have about the students, we can apply to this.
All the information that Mr. Bobbitt gave earlier can be tagged right into this heat map. And then if we get some information from, and I know they're going to share it with us, from Sheriff's Department, the Police Department, that can all be tagged right into this, from Housing Authority, from the city, from the county, can all be plugged. The Haas Center, right? Ms.
Yes.
Gislason, she's excited about this as well. So it can all be right. It takes a team effort to get all that information in here. But wouldn't it be nice to have a team effort on linking all this for academic success. I think we say, success in school and in life. And that's what we want to be able to do here. Thank y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ma'am,
Did you have something? Your light is on.
well,
Y'all may not get to leave
what I
yet.
would, what I'm thinking is the challenge of tying all this together, because the one thing we have to admit is education can't do it by itself. That there are many, many, many aspects that are causing this problem. The last map that was up, Elizabeth, you're going to have people that are going to be embarrassed. You're going to have people that are mad. They're going to people that are say that's not true. I think you have to put together somehow groups that will be honest enough to say what's causing this square to fit into the mold that you're telling us. Who is the problem? And they have to own up to that and then go from there. We will have to go to the table with some finances. I'm not sure where the finance department may find it, but, hi, Mr. Finance Department. But with an expectation, and I go back and what pops in my mind is something that's coming up politically now, and that's, you know, we've got the United Nations and we've gotten other groups, and everybody doesn't do. We've got to go to the table with something and say to them, all right, this is what we're going to do, but what are you going to do? You're going to have to admit that my square is my problem. And I've got to come up with some